if your team has been submitted on Moodle and you're already part of submitted startup team, please sit down. I just want to figure out who do I have left. Okay, so I want you guys to come to me after the lecture so we can deal with all of you and make sure you are in great teams and you can carry on with the subject. Okay, perfect. You may sit down as well. Okay. Let's get straight to it. Question to the last row, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Then I'm not going to use the mic. So welcome on the second week of our startup journey. Introduction to the startup game. So how to come up with the next big idea and make it real. Today, as you see, we're not in our regular place. We're visiting Krakowski Park Technologiczny, so Krakow's Technology Park. And thank you very much, Mateusz, for making that happen. Because as probably most of you know, Akademia Górnicza today is celebrating their 100th anniversary. So happy birthday. And I'm also very happy to see you here, no matter it's officially a day that is not a lecture day, so good for you. I do appreciate that you take your entrepreneurship journey so seriously. Now, some small households announcements today. What's in plan for today? So there will be a probably like 30 to 40 minute lecture on the ideation, so on how to find the right, like how to find or how to verify the idea for your startup. Then we actually have two startup founders who sit here in Krakowski Park Technologiczny, coming here downstairs so that we could talk with them. And of course, it will be again focused on how they have figured out their ideas and what they have done to validate their ideas. So you'll have a chance to actually see some real cases. Then I also want you to start working on the ways you could validate your own ideas, and that's the part for the group work. And also there will be some small housekeeping things, like I want to make sure that we have everyone on Moodle, and if we don't have someone on Moodle, I want to make sure you know how to get there, as well as I want to deal with people who don't have their startup teams yet, because it is a time for you to start working together. As said yesterday, doing startups is not an individual sport. You need a strong team to make that happen. Any questions to the housekeeping announcements? Okay, then let's do it. As said last week, the key traits of a successful startups is disrupting the status quo, having the venture-sized market, and being able to scale. And those three things are connected with one important thing. It's connected with what your startup will be doing. Like, what is the thing that the startup will bring? And from my experience, many founders, especially the first-time founders, keep too much focus on the ideas and not enough focus on the problems that are behind those ideas or the opportunities that those ideas create. So let's dig slightly deeper into it. Often when I meet the first-time startuppers, they're like, I have an idea for an app. I have an idea for something. So it's like, they have like the technology concept or the thought that something like this, it would be nice if something like this would exist. And that's necessarily not a good idea for a startup. Like, that's not the way to go. It's about the problem that the thing you're thinking of is solving. So it's not about, it would be nice if there would be a tool for people to connect with each other professionally. It's more like, people have problems of maintaining professional relationships with them, especially when they change jobs, because their email changes and it's difficult to stay in touch. So that's the rationale for example, LinkedIn to happen. Like this, so switching from ideas to problems that are being solved by these ideas is absolutely crucial. Like a couple of weeks ago, I was here mentoring some startups that are currently here, and I've heard them saying they were not saying, let me give you an example. They were not saying like, we have this new lamp that helps to grow plants faster. They were like, no, we have realized that the biggest cost of agriculture, which does not use the natural light, is actually the cost of electricity for the light. So that's why we have came up with the idea of the lamp that is way more effective or energy efficient. You see, it's not about I have an idea for something. It's like I see that there is a problem that is worth solving. So that's the first thing, and we'll be actually speaking about problems all day today. So there will be plenty more on that. The other path are so-called proven opportunities. This is a little bit more tricky one, but there are certain successful startups that are not solving any easy problem. Like if you think of Facebook, like it's difficult to say that there was some deep underlying problem that has been solved by Facebook. It's more like Facebook has unearthed an interesting opportunity and they figured that there is a potential for it and they decided to go for it, they were successful. However, working on the opportunities is much more difficult than working on the problems. Why does it so? Well, because it's sometimes the lines between I have an idea for something or I see that there's an opportunity for something are kind of murky. And it's easy to get into the idea, to get back into like I have an idea mode instead of like there is a problem I want to solve. That is why, especially for first-time founders, I always recommend to stick to the problem way of thinking. However, I have also provided some resources for you if you do believe that you are creating like a new opportunity and there's no clear problem, but there is still value in what you're doing. So if you want, there are some links at the end of those slides you can follow on to read more about that. But I would encourage you with this journey to focus on solving problems because it makes everything easier. It's easier for you to communicate the value that your startup is bringing. It's easier for you to validate whether there is actually a need for what you're doing. And that is why I would definitely recommend you to focus on problems. But of course, you know, as entrepreneurs, you're free people and you can do whatever you want, and it's up to you to deliver that to the pitch contest at the very end of the semester. Okay. So let's talk about ideas. I actually very like this image, and I thought I'll bring it to you to help you understand that. First of all, ideas are not given once for life. Like it's not like they're in here and they're not going to change. Most of your ideas, even if you have them right now, will evolve in time, and they actually should evolve. We'll be talking about the process of how you could go with your idea so that it could be evolving into the place where it actually solves an important problem. And this is like, it's good to keep that in mind, that it's not going to, like you're probably going to change your idea as you think about it. Like the more you will be working on your ideas, the more you'll be in the ideation stage, the more you will realize that of course, there might be a case that your idea is already perfect and it's already here on the green side. If that's the case, good for you. But for most of us, or at least that has been my case for most of the time, you start on the green part, on the red part, and you actually have to move right in time so that you could, so that your idea becomes better and better. Let me give you an example for that. So, for example, if you're thinking of an app with cooking recipes, you're like, there's, you know, a couple years ago, especially when iPad first came out, that was like, I've seen many people having this kind of idea. Like, yes, there would be wouldn't it be nice if we could transform the cooking books, which are like, you know, printed on paper, into a digital ones. And it turned out that actually this is idea that is definitely in red. Like people don't need an additional cookbook. Like if you're talking to people who already buy cookbooks, they already have enough of them, and there was not enough market. But once they figured out, they started to, once they figured out that actually there are certain niche markets that works, like ethnic cuisine or people who are younger and are not and already don't have a shelf of cooking books on their shelf, it turned out that it's actually a better idea. And by working on the idea, they were able to move from the initial concept, which was, let's say, not very successful, to something that was actually on point, that has a group of people who are really in need of that and were looking for that kind of idea. That's why the process we are talking about today is moving from left to right in here. And the way that is being done is called customer discovery. So, and customer discovery is your ultimate tool to go and find the problem you're solving, or to understand what is the opportunity you are creating. Speaking of solving the problem, it's, as I said, it's extremely important for you to switch from thinking of I have an idea for something to I have a solution for a problem. And the tool I just mentioned, customer discovery, is exactly something that's going to help us with that. So the way this, like the way you can start thinking about it is like, instead of thinking of my startup does this, try to say it in a way, my startup helps someone with something. This way, you need to actually switch your brain from talking about things that you want to build into the problems you're solving or opportunities that you're creating. So when you are thinking of your ideas, and I've seen on your videos that most of you have some ideas already, try to rephrase your idea in such a way that you're not talking about, I have an idea for an app. Let's try to do it the other way around. Like, I see that people have problem with this, and I want to solve it with my app. So, customer discovery. What exactly is customer discovery? That's the quote from Rob Fitzpatrick, who is the author of probably the best book of customer discovery I've ever seen, The Mom Test. And he says that customer discovery is the art of talking to customers to learn whether your idea is actually a good idea. Because how would you know whether your business is on the red field or the green field on the slide I've shown you before? Customer discovery is your way to find out. So customer discovery is the process of talking to your potential customers so that you could discover what's in there. So you can figure out whether there is some fertile soil for the startup, whether there is a need for that startup. The way I usually describe that is, if you ask people if they would like their car to be safer, most of them will say yes. I would like my car to be safer. And then an experienced entrepreneur who doesn't know how to do customer discovery will feel like, okay, so that means there's market for my startup that increases the security of my car. Because I've asked people, and people told me, yes, it's actually, I would like to do that. But a more experienced entrepreneur will know that that's actually not enough, that the great follow-up question to that one would be, okay, so what have you done in the last, let's say, 6 months in order to make your car safer? And this way, you are actually asking them about their past experience. So you're not asking them whether theoretically they would make their car safer. Because it's like, it's like, would you like to study more? Probably all of you would like to study more, but not all of you are going to do something about it. So that is why it's so important to ask those questions first, and then they ask right questions. So the moment I ask the question, okay, so what have you done in the past to make your car safer, you actually reveal what's on their priority list. Like, because it's easy to say like, yes, theoretically, I would love to have my car safer. But if I haven't done anything about that in my last 6 months, do I really care? Probably not that much to buy your product the moment it will arrive on the market. because I will still be distracted with all the other things I have to do in my life. There are two famous quotes connected with customer discovery that I want to cover today. First one is allegedly by Henry Ford, and it says that, if I had asked people what they want, they would have said faster horses. And many people look at that quote and say that that's actually the reason why customer discovery makes no sense, because people don't know what they want. If you look at Steve Jobs' quote about the thing that designing products by focus group is also not the best way to create innovation, you may also start thinking the same way. That's why I want to bring this early on to you, so that you understand that it's actually, I believe that they both got it wrong in a sense. Why? Because people won't tell you what you should build. It's your role as an entrepreneur to figure out how to build stuff and what exactly should be built. But it's also your role as an entrepreneur to ask people and learn that they need faster horses. But if they need faster horses, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to, breed faster horses. It may mean that you need to figure out a car, because it's about the underlying purpose, why do they need faster horses? And if Henry Ford had customer discovery at that time as a tool available, he could follow up this and he could ask okay, so why do you need faster horses? And he would probably learn that it's because people want to move faster from one place to another. And his solution, a car, was a perfect solution to that problem. So it's never wrong to listen to people to understand what are the problems that are in there. However, you should be very careful with taking solutions from them or clues on how this problem should be solved. This is your part of the bargain to figure out how to solve this. But it is utmost important to figure out what are the customers' need. And they will often give you solutions. They will often give you things like faster horses. Don't be swayed too much by that. It's not what they say as a part of solution doesn't really matter. The customer discovery is all about figuring out that the problem they have is real and they are willing to do something about it. Or to be even more precise, they are actually already doing something about it. Because if they have been trying to solve this problem and they failed to do it, that means that there's a great market opportunity that you can fill with your product. Okay, couple of rules of thumbs when it comes to customer discovery. So first of all, customer discovery, as the entire entrepreneurship, is a team sport. This needs to be done by the entire team. You cannot delegate one person to go and talk to people. This doesn't work. I have actually experienced that myself. And by the way, I haven't introduced the two guys. Today in the first row, you have my former colleagues from my last startup. And I must confess that I'm guilty of that. I was doing most of customer discovery all by myself and not sharing it enough within the organization, and it doesn't work well. It makes me full of information, but it doesn't help the entire team grow because they only have the information I will give them. Not all, and only the only conclusions that will be drawn from what customers said were my conclusions, not the team conclusions, because I was the only person who had a chance to actually hear real people talking. So keep that in mind, and even if your team consists of software developers who are not very outgoing and who would prefer to focus on coding, still, you need to be talking to customers because only this way you can use all your team potential to validate your idea through customer discovery. Keep it casual. Usually when I'm able to persuade people to actually start talking to people and validate their idea for those interviews, the problem is that they are very formal. In a way, it's thank you very much for agreeing to this conversation. It will last about 35 minutes and I have 17 detailed questions for you. This doesn't make it. You create too much distance and they feel pressured in a sense, and the responses you get are less likely to be helpful. So they don't really need to know that you're doing customer discovery with them. Like that's not necessary. It's just about you need to know that you're doing customer discovery, and sometimes that might be a casual conversation over beer. Like it doesn't really matter. The more casual you will keep it, the better it is for you to get insights. It's just you need to stay aware of what are the things you want to ask and what is the information you want to get from this process. Then probably the most important thing you will learn today, it's all about talking about their lives, not about your idea. It's not about you pitching what a great startup idea I have. Because if you will start by telling them, my great idea is all about this, well then they'll probably tell you that, yeah, the idea is good. No matter whether it's good or not. Why? Because they won't be interested in hurting your feelings. Like if you meet with someone casually and you tell them about your idea, it's easier for them to say like, yeah, that's fine. No matter you think it's fine or not. Because if I would say like, oh, that's bullshit, it creates some tension in the conversation. So that's why it's pretty important to refrain from talking about your idea and focus to talk about their lives, and this way validate your idea. Like usually I even don't mention my idea either at all or until the very end of the conversation when they start to get curious like why I'm asking about this, especially if they know I'm not in that industry. So that's the first thing. Then the other one is to talk about specifics in the past, not about opinions on the future. So you should never ask about like, would you buy a product that does this? Because theoretically, yeah, I could probably buy almost everything. But does it mean that I'll actually become your early adopter for whatever you're creating? Probably not. That's why it's more important to ask what they have done in the past and whether this proves that the problem you're trying to solve is real and that they're trying to solve it. So there are two key elements here. You're trying to figure out that the problem exists and that the problem is big enough. Because I often hear, let me give you another idea. I've been recently validating the need for companies to improve their HR processes. And I've been talking to multiple people inside the companies, and I was usually asking them like how satisfied you are with the HR processes in the company. And you know what? Nobody said they're satisfied. They were like, it's all crap. So then I followed up with the next question. I've asked them, okay, so what have you done to improve that? Well, nothing was the regular answer. So what I have learned, that actually the problem is not big enough. Like the problem exists, but if they haven't done anything to try to solve it, it means that even if I come to them with a great solution to this problem, I won't be on their priority list because they haven't tried to solve it yet. So it means that the problem isn't big enough. Like if you look at your lives, you probably, all of you have some things you would like to fix or change, but it's just not important enough for you to act on that right now. And you don't want your startup to get on those lists because you will never get any traction. So you'll never get any sales because everybody will be like, oh, that's important, but maybe later. So that is why you should be asking about the specifics of the past to figure out that yes, they do have the problem, and that the problem, that they're already trying to solve this problem. And of course, if they fail badly, that's even better because it means that the problem is not solved. However, the third one is not necessary for the sole reason that it's not a virgin market anymore. Like there are so many other solutions to almost every problem that it's unlikely that they're not able to solve the problem at all. They will be solving problem in a certain way, and that's okay. You just need to make sure that your solution is better or cheaper. Like the typical Silicon Valley way of saying that is like it needs to be 10 times better and 2 times cheaper, basically speaking. Okay, talk less and listen more. Again, this conversation is not about you presenting your idea. It's about you getting the information from the people about what their lives are, what they have been doing in the past, so that you could validate your idea. So the less you talk, the more you listen, the more information you gather. And also people feel pretty comfortable about talking. Like I was surprised to see like how comfortable people were with telling me about like their entire lives during those conversations. So keep in mind that this is not an opportunity for you to brag, to pitch your product, to like expose your ego and say how good you are because you decided to try the path of entrepreneurship. It's not about that. It's about listening other people and validating whether your idea makes sense. Compliments. Often people want to be nice to you, and they will say nice things about you or about the solution once it gets introduced, just to, let's say, shift the conversation from them to you. This happens pretty often if you are pressing for some kind of commitment or you're asking for specifics and they don't feel very comfortable with getting to that. They're like, you'll see that they are trying to compliment you to move the conversation back on your product, your stuff, not necessarily their lives. So whenever you hear compliments in the conversation, like people are complimenting you or the product if it has been revealed, it's always a warning sign, and you should think about, okay, I heard a compliment. It means that probably we're starting to talk about my product. That's a bad sign. Let's get back to talking about them and their lives. Keep that in mind. Notes, reviewing and iteration. That's very important because probably the way you will be doing customer interviews will change over time. While doing customer discovery, you will discover new things. You will realize that your product needs to be solving slightly different problem, and your questionnaire will change. That is why it's important to take notes from each customer interview. If you're doing it really casual, then probably after the meeting so that it won't look too formal as you're noting down it while you're talking. Then you should review it with your team. Again, having notes makes it easier to share the thoughts. Actually, the way I usually do it is the Google spreadsheet, because it's easy to keep it in one place and have everyone can have access to it. But any other way of doing that so that everyone has access to this data is helpful. And then iterate. As I said, this will probably change. The probability that you will have your initial questionnaire for customer discovery and it will stay the same for like first 3 months is close to zero. Like it will change because you will discover new things. You will sometimes figure out that there are bigger opportunities just next to what you have been thinking about. And that's the beauty of customer discovery. Even if customer discovery will, let's say, validate your idea negatively, which will happen for like probably half of you, that you will figure out that that's not necessarily the thing that market needs right now, you will also, through this process, figure out that probably very close to what you have been thinking about, there is yet another fertile soil that that is a great place for startup to start. So keep that in mind and don't be afraid of iterating on that. Actually, every hour spent on customer discovery will save you hundreds of hours down the road when you will have the product that is not ideal and you'll be trying to get some market traction, so some sales and some growth. And it'll be much more difficult because you haven't done your lesson on the customer discovery level. So again, take notes, review them, and make sure to iterate on that and change questionnaire from time to time. Press for commitment. That's yet another way of figuring out whether there is actually a need for your thing or not. So the couple of good signs that I have seen while doing customer discovery with different companies is, for example, if they want to buy a prototype. Like if at the very end of customer discovery, they actually ask you why you're asking all of those questions about, I'll tell you a real story. So I was actually doing customer discovery for the company that was dealing with office plants. So they were putting plants in the office, like regular, green plants, big and small. And I was helping them to figure out whether there is a need for a subscription service where you just pay a fixed fee for it, and they put the plants in the office, they maintain them. Like, think of this as nature as a service, basically. And we're validating whether the idea makes sense or not. So the way it has been done, we're meeting with office managers here around the city. And we're actually bringing a plant with us, like one big plant with us. It was kind of a show by itself because it was pretty heavy. But the thing is that probably around in half of those conversations, people wanted us to leave the plane in the office. Like they were like, could we buy this prototype now? Like if it's such a good thing, if it helps to clean the air in such a good way and it maintains itself without any humans involved, like could we just keep it? And if you have a hardware product and you see people willing to buy the prototype, you're onto something. Like that means that the need is so imminent that people are willing to buy your product right away so that they could start using it. With software products, it's a little bit more tricky, but still, signs like people want you to come back. People will say like, could you come back next week and talk to the entire team about this? That's a good sign. That means that actually you're onto something. If you see that they are willing to do a pilot or a free trial or something like this, then that's also a good sign that indicates that there is a strong interest. Of course, commitment is not something you ask, like you seek at the very beginning when you don't have anything, because you cannot deliver them anything. Like you'll need some time. But the moment you have something, you have like an early version of your product, pressing for commitment is a good way of actually realizing whether they just wanted to be nice throughout the conversation or they really want to solve this problem. Like that's the ultimate way of checking that. But as said, that's not something you'll be doing right now, because at least as far as I'm concerned, most of you don't have their products ready. So it'll be more like discovering things now, and you can add the pressing for commitment part to your questionnaire later on as you will get your product done. Because it's worth mentioning that customer discovery is not something that will end after a week or after 2 weeks. Customer discovery is actually something that startups should be doing all the time. Of course, at the beginning it's very intensive. Like you'll probably need to talk to like at least 30 people to validate your idea. But later on, like one of my mentors used to say that if you haven't spoken to 2 of your customers or potential customers last week, then you have wasted your week. So it's an ongoing process, and it should be an ongoing process. Like you should be talking to your customers constantly to make sure you feel the pulse of the industry or the group that you're solving problems for. Okay, so we have a long list of example questions. Don't note them down because not all of them are good. I want us now to go through this list and discuss which of those questions are actually good and which of those questions are not the good examples of questions you should be asking while customer discovery. So let's start with the first one. Do you think this is a good idea? I can't hear you? No, why not? That's one.
I'm talking about my idea.
And you're talking about your idea, exactly, and you shouldn't. Good, let's go and look at the second one. Why do you bother about this? Why this bothers you actually? That's really the way. Anyway. Good or not good? Why?
You're finding out the problem.
Exactly. This is a good question. Okay, let's move to the next one. Would you buy a product that does this?
No. I think in general when the answer is yes or no, it's not a good question.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's actually true. Like if sometimes, in general, that's right. There are some exceptions to that rule, but I think it's a good rule of thumb. So yes, this one doesn't work as well. Okay, how much would you pay for such product?
No.
Why not?
Because we're thinking about the data.
That's true. Okay, when was the last time when you experienced this?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good question. What were the implications of that? That's also a very good one. What else have you tried? Yeah, that's yet another question that helps you to understand how they were trying to solve the problem. Would you pay for a product that does this? Don't we have that already? We had that already. Sorry. How are you dealing with this now?
Yes.
Yeah. So those are the examples of questions that will help you. of course, different products require different questions, but I wanted to give you at least some initial framework, because as said, later today you're actually going to work on your own questionnaire for customer interviews. So I thought that this might be helpful, so that we actually look at the real questions here. Okay, those are my two favorite questions I like to add at the very end. So first of all, who else should I talk to? Why? Because it's usually difficult to get the pool of people to talk to that is large enough initially. So you actually need to work in such a way that every conversation opens up the possibility to have more conversations. And this is actually a pretty good way of doing that. So whenever you talk to one HR manager, at the very end you ask like, okay, so who else should I talk to about this? Or could you introduce me to someone else I could talk about this? And it turns out people are likely to introduce you to other folks. And this way you grow the number of people you can set up the customer discovery meetings with them. And is there anything else I should have asked? Especially at the beginning, this is crucial, because so many of you will get to, initially you'll get to the point that you will be missing the biggest opportunity that will be buried just next to what you're asking. And because you haven't asked, they haven't told you. But asking those kind of open-ended questions helps you to realize that it's like, okay, that's something that is maybe worth looking at. Like sometimes the other way I ask this is like, okay, so what have you been doing recently? Like what is your main focus in the recent weeks, months, whatever? Because then you'll hear without any suggestion from your end, what is the thing they're thinking of? And that means that if they're thinking about something right now, that means that everything that touches this area will be more interesting to them than anything else. So those two questions are like my two favorite questions to include close to the end of the customer discovery interview to get more feedback and get more people I could talk to. Again, I know I've said that already at least 3 times, but I'm going to repeat this, because if there's one thing you should remember from today's lecture, is that it's all about facts, not about opinions. You want people to tell you real stories from their lives, not opinions on the future. And that's probably the most important thing from today's. One more thing, yet another quote from Rob Fitzpatrick. He says, and I totally agree with him, that you should be terrified with at least one question you're asking in every conversation. What does it mean? It means that especially first-time founders are afraid that during customer discovery, it'll turn out that their idea is not on the green part of the picture I've shown you in the beginning. And they're afraid about it. Like they're afraid of asking questions that could actually prove them wrong. And the way I would like you to start thinking about it is that actually you should be trying to do that. Because if you invest in a bad idea right now, you'll have trouble later on. What does it mean? It means that you will spend 2, 3, 5 years of your life working on a startup that solves a problem that is non-existent. You will also, probably if you'll be persistent enough, you will also raise some money. So there will be some people who will trust you with their money to go and build that. And you'll be still working on an idea that is not well positioned to be successful. So after 2, 3, 5 years, you will realize that, of course, you have learned a lot, but you have wasted some of your time. You have wasted investors' money, and you're still not where you should be. So it's actually better to iterate more at the beginning and to make sure you have done very rigorous process when you're figuring out the idea, and you are not able to undermine the idea in any way during initial customer discovery, because this increases your chance that you will be investing your own time doing this project in the best thing possible. That is why an experienced startup person or an experienced entrepreneur will be asking questions that, if answered yes, will prove that their idea has no point. It's a really difficult thing at the beginning, because again, I remember myself when I was thinking about my first startup and I had an idea, I was actually afraid to Google it because I was like, what if there is already something like this? Like literally, I remember when I was too afraid to look in the internet whether something like this exists or not. Right now, when I'm in the process of starting my own startup yet again, that's actually the first thing I do. Because I'm like, okay, if this is already, if there are already strong players on that market, that means it makes no sense for me to enter that. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of good ideas out there, so I should just pick the best one, not the first one that comes into my mind. That is why asking those terrifying questions during customer interviews makes a lot of sense. Like sometimes it's even the question that suggests the opposite direction. Like going back to the nature as a service startup I've been advising. During the customer interview, I was actually asking them, like, okay, I see that you have no plans in the office, and that's the reality in most of the offices in Krakow. So, do you even need them? Like, I was actually asking them up front, and yes, some of them told me like, no, we're okay with that. Like, we don't need plans here, and it's an important validation because it's better to hear that now than 2 years from, or than to realize that 2 years down the road. That's why you should be asking such terrifying questions during the customer interview. Okay, we have discussed a little bit how the interviews should be done, but the big question is like, so how do I find people to actually have those interviews with? And there's a couple ways to do that. And of course, it depends on the product that you have and the market you want to serve. Because if you are building a consumer product, that's pretty easy because you're just sitting next to a person that could be interviewed. But if you are building the product that solves a specific problem of specific group of people or specific industry, then of course you need to find those people. I was actually surprised to learn how easy it is to get those interviews scheduled. There are multiple ways to do that, like going around and asking people whether they know someone who is in this is usually a very effective way. The other way that I've seen pretty effective is, like, again, going back to the HR startup I've been doing customer discovery with. I just opened my LinkedIn, looked at all my connections and typed in HR, and figured out I know like 20 people who are in HR. I didn't know that actually, but it turns out that, I just gather more connections. I figure out that there are people, so I just sent messages to them, telling them that I would like to talk, and some of them said yes. And then going back to the question, who else should I talk to? I get more introductions, and no matter I've never had any direct contact with any HR department, I was able to do almost 50 interviews with different people. So that's probably the best way for you to go. If you feel that your own network isn't big enough, go and ask around. Like, go and ask your parents, your friends, your teachers, like whoever you have around, because people are willing to help. They just usually want to help you in a bad way by saying that your startup idea is great, and that's not what you want to hear from them. Things you want to hear from them is like, okay, so could you introduce me to someone I could talk about this so I could get more expertise on the field, and that's how you get introduced, and then you do customer discovery with them. To be a little bit more precise, here's a template that I often use to get the meetings. This one is actually for the gaming company I've been helping with customer discovery. Everybody needs customer discovery. Like every startup I advise, customer discovery is like close to, or probably like #1 thing everybody needs. So their idea was to make game testing more efficient, or more in line with the modern QA techniques that are being used in software development. And it turns out that in game development they're like non-existent. I was very surprised to know that, by the way. So that was the way we were looking for customer discovery interviews. So what are the parts in here that are important? First of all, here is the vision. So I'm showing that I'm actually doing something interesting. Like it's for people in the industry, spending less time on testing games is extremely important thing. And so if I'm touching such a thing, they're like, oh, I'm actually curious to talk to this guy just because he is in the space that is interesting for me or touches something interesting. Then the next part of that is framing. So you need to tell them where you are and what this is going to be about. First of all, people these days get thousands of emails. And a lot of them is like a sales spam. So that's why I often tell people that I don't have anything to sell. And I'm not going to try to sell to them. I just want to pick their brains. I just want to learn from them. So this way, I frame it, I say like, oh, I'm pre-product. I have nothing to sell, but I want knowledge. This way, they're not like, oh, I don't want to talk with you, salesperson. Like this way you avoid being put into the box with the label salesperson. Weakness. So another thing is like it's nice to show that you have a weak spot here and they can help you with. People like to help people who are in trouble. So it's nice to say like, ah, I know a thing or two about this, but actually when it comes to game testing, I'm not experienced. Like I know nothing about this, so I need your help. And that's the next part. So I'm putting myself a little bit down in that context, and I'm bringing them up so that they feel admired and important, because again, I want their knowledge. So it's like, you know, I need your information because you are the expert. You've spent so much time in the industry that your insights, like, you know, you just need to help them feel more powerful and more important, because people like to feel that way, basically speaking. And the final one is the ask. So you actually ask them what you want them to do. In most cases, that's either a call or a short meeting, depending on how you do your customer discovery. And again, this may look as a very formal structure. It doesn't need to be that way. Like I was emailing gaming company CEOs with this email, so I wanted to keep it pretty formal, but you can also make it way more casual. You can also move the elements around, but I would recommend you to have all those 5 things in each communication that you send in order to get customer interview, even if that's, you know, a Facebook Messenger message. You can also squeeze that into like 2 sentences and make it like this. Okay, a couple things to how you should organize the entire process. So again, first of all, if I haven't persuaded you so far, I'll make my point again. Include all the team. And when I say all the team, I mean all the engineers, all the designers, all the managers. It's not a salesperson task to do customer interviews. Everyone should be doing that. You can do it in person if you don't feel confident enough to do it, you know, in one-to-one conversations. But everyone in your team should be able to talk to customer, to listen to them, and to draw their own conclusions, because this way you have a larger pool of those conclusions you can use to work on your idea. Questionnaire. That's important to make sure that you're all asking about the same product, because as you start talking to people, you will start to find ideas, like more ideas, your idea will start to grow. So you want to make sure you are all on the same page, and you have a pretty strict structure that you use in all the interviews. Like you don't need to ask everyone all the questions that you have out there, but you need to have a common base of questions that all of your teammates use. And of course you can iterate on that, and you will iterate on that because you will discover new things with every interview you will do. And share and discuss that. Like at least every, I don't know, 3 to 5 interviews, you should sit down together and discuss what you have learned. What are the conclusions? Maybe there are some changes you need to make. Maybe you have discovered something else, or maybe you just confirm what you all thought is the case. So that's the ingredients for success. when do you know that the initial customer discovery is done? Well, that's usually when you start hearing the same answers all and all again, and you like the answers. So usually you just start to feel that, but for me it usually takes around 10 to 15 interviews to narrow down who are the people I should be talking to and what is the actual problem that is worth solving. So first 10 to 15 people are actually used for iteration and calibrating the questionnaire to make sure I'm actually going after the right idea. And then it's usually between 10 and 20 interviews when I see like, okay, I'm getting the same answers and I like them, so it means it's actually ready to go. Like I could start building it because I see that the foundation for the startup is solid. Okay, now let's go through some of the answers that you will hear. And let's try to differentiate good signals and bad signals from what you will be hearing in the interviews. So, the first one, I would definitely buy that. Do you think it's a good signal or a bad signal? Don't be afraid, it's okay to be wrong. I've been wrong multiple times. So, if you hear something like this on the customer interview,
Super great. Super great. That's the answers.
okay. So
It depends on non-verbal signals. Like, is it like, oh, I would definitely buy that, or like, what sounds my home?
yeah, so I think it's actually a pretty bad answer for a very simple reason. It's an easy answer. I could tell you just to get rid of you. I say, I would totally buy that. No firm commitment, nothing. It's yeah, sure, great idea. Keep working on that. Like, I do it myself when I talk to startup founders who I see are not willing to listen or take feedback, and they're like, I've asked them what is the problem they're solving. They're telling me about their idea, so I ask them again about the problem. They're still telling me about the idea, and they finally press me on saying like whether it's a good or bad idea. So like, yeah, I should totally buy that, because it's like, what else I could do at that point? Like, I just want to get rid of you, so I will say you a nice thing so you will move on. Okay, that's cool. I love it. Yeah, same thing. Again, there is nothing specific in this answer that gives you anything. It's just a compliment, and you want to deflect compliments. What are the next steps? Why it's good? Yeah, it goes into the details. Like, it means that someone actually there's a huge difference between I would totally buy that from, okay, so what are the next steps to make that happen? Okay, next one. There's a couple people I can introduce you to when you're ready. This one is extremely tricky because I say it's bad. But why it is bad? It is bad because of when you are ready part. Like, until that part, it was really good because it's something that is firm, and it actually tells you something like, you know, someone is willing to use their reputation to connect you with someone else, which means they're genuinely interested. But once you add when you are ready, it's nothing, because you can be ready. Like, I could never say you are ready. Like, it doesn't bring you an actual data point. But the good way to turn this pretty bad answer into a good one is like, okay, so what are your criteria of me being ready? Like, what should I done to reach that point? And this way you can clarify whether they were just trying to give you some compliments to get rid of you, or they were actually interested, but they are more strict with their requirements, and they're not willing to put the reputation just yet for you. Can I buy the prototype? Yeah, that's a good signal. Can you come back so you can speak to the rest of the team? Also, when can we start the trial? Okay. Looks great. Let me know when it launches. Can't hear you? Yeah, it's like when you're ready. That's also a bad signal. Mainly because it's like it doesn't say anything. I guess I see that from investors many times. Like they're not interested, but they want to keep their hands on things. They're like, yeah, keep me posted. it means like, no, I'm not interested at all. So, but it's like, keep me posted. I see some inexperienced startup founders who think that this is actually a validation. Like when somebody says like, yeah, it looks great, let me know. They say like, yes, I had a great meeting. They come back to your team and say like, yes, I had a great meeting. Everything's going well. They said to let them know when it launches, and I'm sure they will buy after that. No. Like, look for the facts. Don't get too excited by compliments and all the fluff that you will be getting. More resources on that. As you may have seen in the syllabus, there are only 2 books for this course that I recommend, because I think that entrepreneurs should actually focus more on action, less on reading the books. However, one of those 2 books is The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, that has already been mentioned a couple of times today. It is like a 40-page book, so it's not very long. It takes me like a flight to read it, so it's really not the long one. And Rob is a software developer. He is a very shy person by himself, and he had written a book on his own experience with doing customer discovery. So most of the things I've been talking about today has been inspired by what he says, because I believe he is like the ultimate guru of customer discovery. If you want to do it in a slightly less painful way, I've seen that he also has the Udemy course for the same subject, which is, I don't know, like 5 hours long or something like this. So if you prefer, you can also do that, but I would highly encourage you to have either the book or do the course. The book is like $10 on Amazon, and you can get it on your Kindle, so it's not extremely expensive. And that's a resource that your startup team will be using now and 5 years from now and 10 years from now. Like, I keep rereading this book at least every 6 months. And then I promised you some resources about the of discovering the opportunities, if you do feel that it's more about opportunity than a problem. And that's the link that is to the pretty lengthy article about understanding how the opportunities part works. Because problems are easier, opportunities are more difficult, but if you want to pursue the opportunities, there are some resources for you here. Okay, moving on. The final and the most important thing, I know I've said it last week, but I'll keep saying that. Listening is the most important thing you may have as an entrepreneur. Again, it's not about talking about your product, it's about listening about their needs. That's something you should be focused on. Okay, that's enough when it comes to the lecture part. Now we will do a 10-minute break so that we could all relax a little bit. So we're back here 11:15, and I will bring 2 startup founders that work usually here in the technology park, and we'll talk about how they have figured out their ideas and how they have validated their ideas, so that you could hear some real life stories from them. And then we will start working in the teams on your own questionnaires, because the thing for you this week is actually to go and validate your idea, because you need to be working on something, and to figure out what your startup will be doing, you need to validate that with people. So that's what we'll be doing in the group session part, and I'll be coming from one group to another to help you guys with certain things. Once I'll help the people who don't have their teams yet. Any questions? Okay, then we'll see each other 11:45. Thank you.